Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it, Thursdays here at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Damon Barr, back at our ESPN Lincoln studios. We are doing a patio show today, getting the old equipment dusted off and ready to gear up for the Saturday road show, as we're going to be down at Woodland Hills for the tee-off for Treasures, Tyson's Treasure Chest. Me and Cranack on the road Saturday morning, 7 to 9 a.m., but plenty of football and sports to get into today, as it's Casa de Schmidt back on the patio. The German Shepherd is guarding the gate. The Labradoodle is... Where did she go? She wants me to rub her belly. She just rolled over. You can join us at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825 5865. So, Damon, brother, you know the drill. You're going to need to text me and say, shut up, Schmidt, quit talking, get out for commercial. Can we get back into roadshow form before COVID, when we were down in the rail yard for state tournament basketball and Husker hoops and tailgates and all those awesome times for football season? Are you in roadshow form, my friend?
I'm ready. I miss your beautiful face here in the studio. It's going to be weird just looking at the void today. So it'll be a fun one.
Well, I miss you too, sir. This tweet coming from Brett McMurphy from Stadium. All right, that's a plane. Great. I was like, dear God, do I have this Junior got the surround sound cranked up downstairs? That frightened me. Okay, Brett McMurphy, percent chance college football starts on time. As John Blutarski would say, 0.0. If you remember that scene from Animal House, Dean Wormer dropping the big one. And, of course, the responses to Brett McMurphy throwing more shade on the hope and prayer of a college football season starting earlier. Some response, no better time than now. There's a gif of Mr. Rogers putting on a clown mask, which is quite frightening. Kevin Bacon saying remain calm. And then, of course, you got to have the appearance by Bluto himself breaking a beer bottle over his head. And the token, it wasn't over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor. We'll see. We'll talk with Gary Barnett coming up in just a bit, about an hour, with Coach Barnett, get his take on how he would work spring football, how he would navigate this COVID 2020 season. A lot to get into with Jaquez Yant. I should say Jaquez Yant, a walk-on that's a scholarship good player, has been added to the Nebraska football team. We will get to that in just a moment. We'll also get you an update on Marquise Buford, as Buford will make his announcement at 3:16 Central Time on Saturday. Excited for that. It sounds like things could be all right for Nebraska. Buford, a tremendous athlete. You can find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. And also be sure to check out Damon Barr at Damon Barr. That's 2 R's is where you can find Damon. Email Chris at HailVarsity.com. Always follow Hail Varsity. Always follow at ESPN Lincoln. We have the guru of college football. That is Phil Steele. Phil Steele is 15 minutes away, and we go full gore Big Ten with Phil Steele. Phil's going to talk to us about Nebraska. Phil's going to talk to us about his surprise team, Northwestern, his take on if Ohio State can be dethroned, who's a dark horse in the East, who's the dark horse in the West, and who can knock off Wisconsin. All of that covered most of this hour with Phil Steele. Coming up at 4:25, Gary Barnett, Brandon Vogel in hour 2, Danny Burke, the Pride of Chicago. We'll get the latest on what's happening in Vegas in a moment. Okay, Damon, I need your thoughts here. We were going to set a Vegas odds for the first dog to bark, and it is the German Shepherd. They may have to move inside. So, question here. Did you ever wear a disguise, Damon, to try and buy liquor when you were a teen? This is problematic. It's a prank that's gone crazy on social media with TikTok. That is a reality. I remember Teen Wolf. Yes, Teen Wolf has been mentioned today, where Michael J. Fox's eyes turned red, and the guy at the liquor store in the small town where Teen Wolf took place freaked out and sold a keg of beer to Michael J. Fox's character. And then, of course, Dazed and Confused, the movie classic where Mitch is able to go in as an 8th grader, pretend he works for the city, and buys a 6-pack for the crew. So, Damon, I was always afraid to get nailed. I had a cousin who had a roommate that got federal charges thrown on him because he drove to New Mexico from Boulder to try and get a fake ID, and he got popped for it. It was an undercover situation, so that scared the heck out of me when I was 16. I wasn't along on the road trip. I just was told this is the worst case scenario. It's not that they just confiscate your driver's license. I didn't pay the guy on Able 4, the corner dorm guy who had the fake ID kit set up in 1996, my $50 to get a fake ID. I found people that could hook me up. End of discussion. Don't do that, in all honesty. But in seriousness, do you have any buddies that tried to pull this off? Or you're in a weird buffer zone when you're 19, 20, and you're waiting to be 21 in college to go have a beer. Did anyone ever dress up TikTok style? Everyone's wearing a mask now. Maybe this is the new disguise, and they figure they can get beer before they're really able legally to purchase it, Damon.
Well, I don't think I ever had the confidence or the guts to go full McLovin into a liquor store.
Right.
But I did know a guy who he had a fake, allegedly, and he just goes up to the bar, and they're like, this is fake. And he's like, no, it's not. And they're like, okay, this officer's going to scan your ID. He's like, okay, it's real. And then the officer scans the ID, and he's like, yeah, this is fake. You're getting a ticket. Mm-hmm. Just leave the bar.
That's it. I mean, I shouldn't say that's it, but
he was just
so the guy tried
really
to pull one off.
Really stupid attempt.
He kept denying.
No, it'll scan. It didn't scan.
So he went full McLovin.
He did.
That's pretty good. Now the police are awesome, but the police weren't the police in Superbad. Cool, right?
Not that cool, no.
They weren't that cool. But man, fakes are stupid. Just be patient. Don't buy underage. This public service announcement brought to you by Hail Varsity Radio. But in all seriousness, if think about it, man. If you're IDing somebody, and we still got to get checked out. If I'm buying some Tito's or something at the store, I've got to have the cashier, even at the self-checkout, dial in my birth date. So if you're wearing a mask, maybe your eyes look old. Maybe you're a little wrinkly at the eyes. I don't know. Maybe your eyes look older.
As a 21-year-old, the mask always is like, oh man, are they gonna actually believe I'm 21? I'm wearing the mask. I look kind of young.
Yeah, you do, and that's okay. You're gonna love it in 5 years. You're gonna love it in 10 years. If they keep doing their thing with you on that. So let's get into a little bit of recruiting. And Nebraska able to add a walk-on to their class of 2020. He's a 3-star, and his name is Jaquez Yant. He's out of Tallahassee, Florida, Goodby High School. And with Yant, he's a guy, and I watched some of his film a little bit earlier when this news came down. And the guy's size is pretty impressive. He's 6 foot, maybe a little bit over 6 foot, and he's about 185. But he looks thicker and heavier than that. He just does. Hang on a second. Gertie, lay down. Quiet. This was a bad idea, Damon. This was absolutely a bad idea. Let's do a patio show. It's pleasant. It's nice out. The kids downstairs. The dogs are in back with me. Forgive me on that. Back to Yant. Listen, anytime you can get a guy that's got a 3-star rating, which Yant does, not only into your program from Florida, from Tallahassee, that's a teammate with Keyshawn Green, but if you can get a guy like that to walk on, it's pretty nice. Now, I think Nebraska was probably originally looking at him as more as a kind of a thumper in the box, safety or linebacker, but his highlight film is pretty nice. He's a big back. He has some explosiveness to him. He's really shifty. I mean, when I look at Yant's film as a running back, he does a good job taking the handoff out of the zone read and then just gets to the outside shoulder of the offensive lineman and is shifty enough to avoid a tackle, but he's got enough leg drive, at least per this high school film, that he runs through quite a few tackles. And he is pretty much a punisher inside the 5, inside the 10, when this high school wanted to go heavy and hand off with a full house backfield. The line that he played for did a nice job of paving the way, but Yant did a good job of powering forward. Damon, no one really got a clean shot on the kid, and I think it's a wonderful pickup. Now, 25 walk-ons for Nebraska for the 2020 class, and that's something that's nice. The other schools that were interested in Yant, I mean, we're talking Ole Miss, we're talking Florida, and also UAB. Nebraska able to get him as a walk-on. I think the problem is, and I don't have this officially, but Yant was one of those guys that maybe was going to have to go the JUCO route because of academics, and things got cleared up in time for him. So Yant's able to walk on, and if he can kind of wow factor it, so be it. And I think of a couple of guys that are on different sides of the ball. I think of Janovich, how good a ball player he was and how early he played, even though he was a walk-on. And I think of Jared Tomich. Jared Tomich just wasn't a guy that had a lot of film because of where he was from. But he was an All-American and a third-round NFL pick, and Nebraska's been legendary in their history at finding guys to go walk on. I am hip. Mike Babcock was talking about him, and guys that will go earn a scholarship and be not only a contributor but a special player in all conference, and in Tomich's case an All-American. So when it comes to academic eligibility, those things had been adjusted for Yant due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that eligibility question got answered. That's a win for Nebraska when it comes to dealing with this pandemic, dealing with COVID-19. And it's nice for Nebraska to get a guy the caliber here of Jaquiz Yant out of Tallahassee, Florida. So Nebraska's pretty full at running back. Let's see if he's a linebacker or a safety. Or maybe they just throw him at running back and see what shakes out. On the horizon for Nebraska is Marquise Buford. And Greg Smith from HailVarsity.com and magazine will have much more on Buford. But Buford is one of the top-rated athletes in the country. Buford's a guy that is from Trinity Hill Christian out of Cedar Hills, Texas. I think that's the same high school as Maurice Washington. And it's where Deion Sanders is at or was at. And I look at Buford, and Cal and Iowa State and Ole Miss are really interested in him along with Texas A&M. But Buford's a guy that Nebraska's been in a lot of contact with. They've recruited him pretty heavily. And we'll see if all that work pays off. You get a guy that is dynamic, like a Marquise Buford. You add him to that they have that athlete tag, but you add him to, the cornerback spot. That could be a big win for Nebraska for 2021. We'll see where Nebraska goes. We'll see what Marquise Buford decides to do Saturday. If you want to set your phone time for it, 3:16 Central Time for Marquise Buford out of Cedar Hill, Texas. Is he the next for Nebraska? Nebraska needs to get another cornerback, and we'll see if Buford's the guy. Coming up, Phil Steele is going to join us. Mr. College Football does great work with the Phil Steele College Football Preview. He has put a ton of work in. It's been a weird year, to say the least. And Phil Steele will join us and give us thoughts on Nebraska, the Big Ten West, the Big Ten East. That is going to happen here. We have 2 segments with Phil Steele. The full Big Ten Monty is going to be nice. Gary Barnett will join us at 5. And we'll catch up with Brandon Vogel and Danny Burke in hour 2. Hail Varsity on the patio today. As Phil Steele, next Hail Varsity continues. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And we're back
Fellas, you think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back to you, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. You know it's football season. We hope it's football season when it's time to talk with Phil Steele, Mr. College Football himself, and the College Football Preview is out on your newsstands and hopefully in your mailbox. Can get a hold of that, philsteele.com, and find Phil on Twitter at philsteele042. And we say hi to Mr. College Football. Phil, what's up? Good to talk with you. How you doing?
Hey, I am doing great, Chris. How about yourself today?
We're good. We are good. Just hoping for football, man. And I know it's been maddening for a lot of us that cover the sport to play this waiting game. And I want to ask you, Phil, as we dive in, how did you navigate this off season as you put your data, your information, you talk to all the coaches? What's that feedback been like for you with them?
I enjoyed talking to the coaches because there's a lot of positivity there. In fact, the coaches, a lot of them, hey, coach, tough luck. You didn't get spring practice. And they're pretty much like what they preach during the season, next man up. They're like, hey, you know what? We didn't get spring practice. A lot of teams didn't get spring practice. We did get in winter conditioning. We'll be fine. Put the football on the field. We'll play, and we'll be as close to good as possible. And I think these coaches are almost all in the same vein in the fact of, and it's what you'd expect out of a coach, Chris. Next man up. We're going to get it done, and whatever you throw in my path, it doesn't matter.
That's the mindset you got to have. Phil Steele's with us talking college football, Hail Varsity Radio, and Nebraska got a couple of practices in for spring, but things got shut down due to the pandemic. And I want to start off with Nebraska. I know we spoke last year, and you had the Huskers circled as your most improved team for 2019. You're on the money with that traditionally, and Nebraska surprised a lot of people last year. What made Nebraska, in your estimation, stub their toe so often a season ago?
Well, I think it was a couple of different factors. Number one, I believe Adrian Martinez getting banged up and not having the type of season that he had just back in 2018 as a freshman. I think that was one big difference, whereas in 18, Adrian Martinez was a dynamic playmaker. Last year, 10 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions, and didn't run for as many yards, a little banged up during the course of the year, and you could see it in his play. The second one was there's some close losses. You go back to that Colorado game, Chris. And after the third quarter, I felt pretty good about Nebraska. They're just pretty much dominating the football game. And then all of a sudden in overtime, they're losing the game on a field goal. They had a couple other close losses last year. Indiana, Purdue, both close losses with Iowa, kicking that 51-yard field goal in wind and rain to beat them by 3. So there were some close losses out there. But overall, I was disappointed, naturally, in the performance out of Nebraska. And usually my number one most improved team is that most improved team. And the Huskers let me down last year.
Nebraska's trying to bounce back. In your conversation with Coach Frost, I mean, what stuck out to you about the outlook for 2020 from his point of view? And as you crunch some of the numbers, what do you think of the Big Red in 2020?
Well, as far as Coach Frost goes, there's about 20 coaches I did not talk to this year. And Coach Frost was one of them,
Gotcha.
So I did not get to go over the team with him. But when I look at the Nebraska, this year you have to look at good depth at quarterback. I like the fact that Martinez is, of course, back, and hopefully will regain the 2018 form. Luke McCaffrey, I think, is a solid backup quarterback and one that should be ready to play. It was good to get his feet wet last year in the games that he did, playing 4 games as a true Frosh. He'll be much better prepared as a redshirt Frosh. Looking at the running back position, Dedrick Mills was coming from the Georgia Tech offense, which was a different style of offense, coming from a JUCO. And in the first half of the year, he wasn't dynamic. But the second half of the year, that's when JUCOs usually come on. That's when Dedrick Mills came on. And I think we're going to see him continue to be one of the better running backs in the Big Ten. Plus, they got good depth there with Ramir Johnson, Ronald Tompkins. The receiving core loses Spielman, but I like Wandale Robinson. It's too bad he wasn't around for the full year last year because he's a dynamic athlete. Omar Manning being added, my number 19 rated wide receiver coming out of junior college this year, could be a big-time addition there. The offensive line looks solid, and probably my biggest question mark on the team, Chris, is going to be that defensive line. Practically the entire unit gone from last year, some pretty good players, and, let's face it, Nebraska's defense has not been that black shirt type of defense in recent years, so they're going to have to show improvement over allowing 389 yards per game, much more so than they did last year.
Phil Steele's with us, few minutes talking Big Ten and Nebraska college football 2020. Phil, you look at Nebraska's schedule, and we don't know what that's going to officially look like as we talk. But if it sticks to it and it's still just conference, Nebraska's schedule is very difficult in conference, and that close is a great opportunity, but it could be a bear to try and navigate with their Final Five. What sticks out to you about Nebraska's schedule as you view it here going into this year?
Yeah, if we're looking at conference only, you have to think Nebraska has a real good chance of being favored over Purdue in the first Big Ten game. The Northwestern game, I'm saying be careful of this Northwestern. They're one of my most improved teams this year. They're my number 2 most improved team, and just 2 years ago they were playing in the Big Ten title game, and they've got Ramsey, a quarterback from Indiana, a big plus. And their defense last year was actually in the top 20 of college football and has 9 starters back, so including Patty Fisher at linebacker. That's going to be a tough game, week 2. Then hosting Illinois, they'll be favored. At Rutgers, they'll be favored. So a great start to the Big Ten schedule. But as you alluded to, the 5 games at the end of the schedule are just brutal. In fact, the top 2 teams in the Big Ten East this year are Ohio State and Penn State. Nebraska draws them both. At Ohio State, home against Penn State, then play the top 2 teams perhaps in the Big Ten West, at Iowa, at Wisconsin. That's 4 road trips in 5 weeks, and wrap it all up with Minnesota, a team that almost won the Big Ten West last year. That is a brutal final 5 games for Nebraska.
Phil, as we zoom out and talk Big Ten West a little bit, you've already touched on Northwestern as they just didn't get enough offense generated a season ago. They had quarterback issues. Ramsey, I think, he was great. When he came to Lincoln, he did a wonderful job getting a start and pulling out the win in Lincoln in a shootout ball game. So Ramsey with that Northwestern offense, I think, could make them something to deal with. What's your feel with Wisconsin, and where are you at with Minnesota? Does Minnesota take that next step? They were great last year at 11-2, but they didn't win the division. Could they knock off Wisconsin, or is it still Wisconsin's West Division to crown?
Yeah, and I want to throw Iowa into the mix as well. I think they're a good enough team to get in there. We'll start with Minnesota. Minnesota, I would say at the midway point last year, was pretty fortunate to get to 5-0, 6-0, because you look at barely getting past South Dakota State, Fresno State, Georgia Southern, games they could easily have lost, needed late fourth quarter comebacks to win, beaten Purdue by 7, but Purdue lost their starting quarterback and All-American Rondale Moore on the one play in the first quarter, and that really helped them out in that game. But then they got better as the season went on, and granted they lost at Iowa and got beat by Wisconsin by 21 at home, but they really impressed me in a bowl game against Auburn, where they had a outstanding 23-13 first down edge. Offensively, no questions. Tanner Morgan, big offensive line. Mohamed Ibrahim at running back. Ottman, Bell, and Bateman at wide receiver. They're great. Defensively, I have some questions. They only have 4 starters back. Lose a lot of the top players, including Antoine Winfield, Kamal Martin, Thomas Barber. In fact, 5 of the top 6 tacklers are all gone for Minnesota's defense. So how quickly that unit comes around, will they catch the same breaks they did last year, winning a lot of close games? That would be my biggest question mark with Minnesota. My biggest question mark with Iowa is, what did Kirk Ferentz do to the Big Ten schedule maker? Because you look at Iowa, they've got a good team this year, 16 returning starters. And let's remember, while they were 10-3 last year, their 3 losses were by 7, 5, and 2 points. That puts them just a handful of plays away from being undefeated last year. They were that good. And this year, they are very good as well. They lose their quarterback, but they're talented. But look at the schedule. They have to play at Ohio State, at Penn State, and they not only play both of the top 2 teams, they play them both on the road. And guess what? They play them in back-to-back weeks. And Ohio State's off a bye and Penn State's off a bye. So really a rough scheduling advantage for Iowa there. They also have to play, of course, Wisconsin at the end of the year. But I think they're a legitimate contender in the Big Ten West. And then wrap it all up with Wisconsin. I think everybody expected Wisconsin to maybe step back last year, not be as dominant as normal. They were picked 3rd by the Big Ten media. I believe I picked them 3rd in the West as well last year. Then they come out and just absolutely ramshackle the first 6 teams they play. 4 shutout wins and dominate. They gave away a late comeback loss to Illinois. It gave Ohio State a good game for 3 quarters and lost. And how about the Big Ten title game? Wisconsin rallied to win the West, and then there they are in the Big Ten title game, and they're leading that thing 21-10 at the half. It looked like they were going to win the Big Ten title. They've got 15 returning starters coming back. My biggest question marks for them are 3 players. They lose Jonathan Taylor, running back, 2,000-yard rusher. They lose Chris Orr and Zach Bond at linebacker, and those guys combined for 23 sacks last year. How do they replace those 3 will determine it, but, like I said, last year, Wisconsin only had 11 returning starters. They were number 95 on my experience chart. They're actually more experienced this year.
Wisconsin looks, again, like the team to beat, and you highlighted 3 major voids with that Wisconsin team, but Coach A.D. Alvarez and Coach Chris seem to reload. They've got a phenomenal development system going up at Wisconsin. Any surprises? Any dark horse out of the West that could make a run? I know you've touched on Northwestern, but is there a surprise team to look out for in the West that maybe could shake things up?
Yeah, and I think that team is Northwestern. I touched on them earlier, but I'll take a little deeper dive right now. Bringing in Peyton Ramsey on offense is big. Also, this is a team that's got 10 returning starters on offense, so it's a veteran group. You look at them up front. Coach Fitzgerald loves this unit. Rashawn Slater at left tackle is one of the best left tackles in the country. Gunnar Vogel gives him size at that right tackle spot. 4 returning starters up front, and they add in Peter Skoronsky at center. And I think this true freshman is going to step in and be one of those true freshmen that play extremely well as a true frosh. And then defensively, they didn't need to improve. Last year, they only allowed 336 yards per game, and that was with 6 returning starters. 9 starters are back. Patty Fisher, middle linebacker. Ernest Brown, defensive end. Sam Miller, the other defensive end, also back this year. All 3 guys have NFL capabilities, as do cornerback Greg Newsome and safety J.R. Pace. So this is a very good Northwestern defense. And remember, Pat Fitzgerald heading into last year was on a 15-1 run against Big Ten foes. So I like that. I like the fact that Fitzgerald's got a veteran team to work with this year as opposed to last year when he didn't. And they are my surprise team in the Big Ten West.
More with Phil Steele, Mr. College Football, and good insight from him on the Big Ten West. He loves him some Northwestern, man. The bounce back for Coach Fitz and company. Some nice thoughts on Nebraska. We'll look at the Big Ten East with Phil Steele, and that's coming up here as Hail Varsity continues, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy.
Phil Steele's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Phil, going to go to the east side and get a couple of thoughts. Ohio State looks loaded. I know they got to replace a lot, but where are you at? Was it much of a tug-of-war with Ohio State, Penn State? Because I know Coach Franklin has a great defense returning as well.
Yeah, it was a little nip and tuck because Penn State gets that game at home, keep in mind. And when you look at Ohio State, and I could point this out among any of the national prospects there this year, Chris, there are a couple of flaws you could point out. Running back depth I'm concerned with. They bring in Trey Sermon from Oklahoma, but Master Teague hurt his Achilles. And then who's the next back there? Is it Steele Chambers? Is it Marcus Crowley? Is it DeMario McCall? We don't know. And so the running back depth, a little bit of a question. What isn't a question is quarterback Justin Fields. I mean, he answered all my questions last year, Chris. I wondered if he could read defenses. Well, 41 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Yeah, put a check mark by that box. And then on the offensive line, they returned Myers, Davis, and Munford up front. All three guys turned down. The NFL opted to return. Who's going to replace Chase Young on defense? Well, last year they lost a lot of guys to the NFL and then lost Jonathan Cooper at the start of the year. Cooper's back this year. I think the defensive line will be good. The linebacking core might be the most veteran group in the country with Browning, Borland, Warner, and Hilliard, all seniors that have all started. And then the secondary, they just reload in that area. But you touched on Penn State, and, I want to go back, and I've talked to Coach Franklin each of his 7 years at Penn State, and what a remarkable job building this team James Franklin has done. You go back to the first year I talked to him, and they were coming off probation. They might have had, a walk-on starter somewhere with lots of walk-ons in the two deep, lack of depth, lack of scholarships. Their offensive line was a mismatch unit with no depth. And now this year, going over the team with them, I commented to him when I was talking to him, like, this is a whole different animal, Coach. I mean, they go 3 deep at every position. And I'm not just talking players' names. We're talking about highly touted guys coming out of high school that are now third string and just chomping at the bit to get in. It's almost like an Ohio State situation for him. So he's done a great job recruiting. You touched on the defense, Chris. Oway up front at the defensive end spot, Shelton at nose guard, the other defensive end, Shaka Tony, and then maybe the best linebacker in the game in Micah Parsons. You can go a long way with the good defense. They've got a strong offensive line, a veteran unit with almost everybody back. They've got Sean Clifford. And then how about a running back core that goes 6 deep in talent? So they do have the talent to contend with Ohio State. And keep in mind, 3 years ago they lost to Ohio State by 1 point. 2 years ago they lost to Ohio State by 1 point. Last year they did lose by 11, but made it a one-score game in the fourth quarter. I think Penn State's a threat to Ohio State, but I did go with the Buckeyes.
Where's Michigan at and Sparty? And let's talk Indiana as we round out the Big Ten East. Can Indiana replicate what they did? Does Harbaugh surprise? And you're starting, I don't want to say over, but, I mean, D'Antonio did such an amazing job with Michigan State in his career. Where's that program headed, at this point in time?
Yeah, let's talk about those three. We'll start with Michigan. I think their window to win the Big Ten was last year. I mean, they had a veteran team. Ohio State had an experienced team. Ohio State had a brand new head coach in Ryan Day. Ohio State was coming off a season where they had been 13-1 in 2018, Chris, but they weren't a 13-1 team. They had so many narrow escapes during the course of the year. You remember the Nebraska game, only a 5-point win. They beat Maryland in overtime. Maryland missed a 2-point conversion. They had other close games throughout the year. It seemed like every game, the Penn State game, they won by a single point. And their defense in 2018 gave up 403 yards per game, the most in Ohio State history. So I thought Michigan could actually win the Big Ten last year. I was wrong. Ohio State with Ryan Day was 2 touchdowns better than the 2018 version. And Ohio State had to travel to Michigan last year. This year, Ohio State gets them at home. And Michigan, by the way, drops from number 43 on my experience chart all the way down to number 130. So I think window closed. I don't see them winning the Big Ten East. Now, they're not going to be a bad team, but it's going to be maybe your typical Jim Harbaugh squad, 8 or 9 wins this year, if they play 12. If not, let's say 2, 3, 4 losses for them. Now, the team that could challenge Michigan for that number 3 spot in the East is Indiana. And you want to talk about a coach building the program. Tom Allen's doing a phenomenal job, and he's not doing it with just players out there. He's got NFL-caliber players in the defense. You're looking at players like Jerome Johnson at nose tackle, Cam Jones at weak side linebacker, Marcelino Ball at the Husky position, Reese Taylor at corner. There's a lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball, and if he can keep Michael Penix healthy, they've got a dynamic quarterback. Stevie Scott at running back, one of the better, more underrated running backs in the Big Ten. Wap Villor is a threat at receiver, and the offensive line looks solid this year. Plus, they got Peyton Hendershot, the top-notch tight end, one of the best in the country. So Indiana, I think, gives Michigan a run for that number 3 spot. And then on the other end of the spectrum is Michigan State. And, all year, Chris, I've been talking to the coaches, and as mentioned, if you're an experienced head coach with an experienced team, it's like a blip missing spring practice. We can handle it. But if you're a brand-new head coach with 0 spring practices, you're in a tough situation, unless you inherit a veteran team. Well, Michigan State's not a veteran team. They only have 10 returning starters this year and 0 spring practices. At least most first-year head coaches got to bring in a freshman class where they know those players. Mel Tucker took the job after the freshman class was signed. So you're talking about a major tough situation. Didn't have a single practice with these players. Doesn't really know the players on the team. I think Michigan State, after 3 straight winning years, 3 straight bowls, I do think they take a step back this year. In fact, it's been 9 bowls in the last 10 years. I think they're going to struggle to try to make a bowl game this year with the situation that Mel Tucker's been tossed into.
Phil, last thought. Phil Steele's with us talking college football 2020, Big Ten, philsteele.com. It's where you can log on and order the football yearbook for 2020. Get to your newsstand, of course, at Phil Steele 042 is where you follow Phil on Twitter. When it comes to if we get a college football playoff, or you look at some of the New Year's Day 6 bowls, we're hopeful that all happens. That said, how well positioned is the Big Ten to maybe get 2 teams in a playoff when you look at the Penn State, Ohio State setup?
I think, Chris, if we do go to conference-only play this year, which is a distinct possibility, it's going to be tough for any conference to get 2 teams in there because you can't compare conference versus conference. And I think you'll probably end up with 4 conference champs. So, but Penn State does give a legitimate threat to that because Penn State's a quality team. I think they're a top 8, top 7 team this year, and Ohio State's up there as well. And, if the other conferences beat themselves up and you've got a 2-loss champ or a 3-loss champ, then the possibility exists. But I think the Big Ten's best shot at getting 2 teams into the playoff would be Ohio State, 1, and Penn State, 2.
Phil, it's always a pleasure. We hope to catch up in the fall at some point, and thanks again for your insight and the chance to chat again.
Hey, always a pleasure talking football with you, Chris. And let's definitely talk football during football season this year. Let's bring some optimism to the program, and let's say we're playing football this year, and we'll talk mid-season. Huh, my friend?
That sounds good. You take care, Phil.
All right, Chris. Thank you.
Gotta love him, Mr. College Football. That is Phil Steele at Phil Steele 042 on Twitter's where you follow him. His college football yearbook. Man, he's got a lot of love, and deservedly so, for Ohio State. But that Ohio State-Penn State game, if we get it, going to be another must-see. Better thoughts on Nebraska. Catch that full interview with Phil Steele on the Big Ten. You can go to ESPNLincoln.com. It'll also be posted on Twitter at ESPN Lincoln Twitter handle. A quick timeout. We'll wind down Hour 1 with Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down this first hour, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. On the patio today, watching a little bit of the memorial. Jack Nicholson getting clearly not interviewed for this. I said Nicholson, not Nicholas. I've never done that. I've done that now. That's horrific. But Jack is wearing a tie and is nice and comfortable and air-conditioned. We're out on the patio at Casa de Schmidt. Damon Barr back in studio. Gary Barnett's going to be with us. Coming up in about 10 minutes, we'll spend some time with Brandon Vogel. And then the Pride of Chicago, Danny Burke, will be with us. So we have an extended set of guidelines issued by the NCAA. That's been issued today by Mr. Emmert and Company to help navigate the return to fall sports during the pandemic. And this was a statement from Mark Emmert. Although testing and contact tracing infrastructures expanded considerably, the variations in approach to reopening America for business and reaction, and I should say recreation, are correlated with a considerable spike in cases in recent weeks. So they're a little queasy about that, which I understand. The NCAA's guidelines released today include testing strategies for all athletic activities. That includes preseason testing, regular season testing, postseason testing, along with daily self-health checks, the use of face coverings and social distance during training, competition, and that being practiced on the time frame that they're outside of athletic competition, and any recommendations that come forward when it comes to a safe return to sport will depend on the trajectory of COVID-19. So that means that there can't be tens of thousands of people being infected. And, you know, we can talk about folks that come down with COVID. We can also talk about folks that are hospitalized and what does a region's hospitalization look like versus the fact that somebody's tested positive. The NCAA is concerned. We're all concerned about folks who get sick from COVID, and the liability aspect and accountability aspect is the freak out point for the NCAA. They don't want anyone to get sick or worse, but they don't want to be responsible by allowing sports to happen and have someone come back and hold them liable for wrongful death. So the recommendation on a pathway towards safe return to play, that's going to depend on that trajectory of COVID spread. That from the NCAA Chief Medical Officer, the idea of sports resocialization is predicated on a scenario of a reduced or flattened infection rate. So they're going to go off of, is your region getting infected? Is your town infected? What's your state look like? What's your state government? What's their take on things? That's going to be the plan of attack, and that's the statement from the NCAA. We'll get some thoughts from Gary Barnett, how he would handle this pandemic. What's the outlook from him with the conferences, his take on the Big Ten's decision to go conference only, and can this get pulled off? Get his thoughts on Joel Klatt's idea. You make it an 18-week season, but you do 10 games, so you're playing every other week. Gary Barnett's next. Hour 2, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Great to have you back. Hour 2, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Damon Barr. Got a little bit of the memorial on the TV. We're outdoors today, a little patio set up, getting ready for this weekend, and the Tyson's teeing off for Treasures golf outing to benefit and raise awareness and funds for pediatric brain cancer. Excited to do that this weekend. Excited to talk some college football with the longtime coach at Colorado and Northwestern. We say hi to Gary Barnett. Coach, how's your day going?
It's going pretty well, Chris. What's going on there?
You know, the dogs are staring at the gate. They're threatening to make a run for it, even though they can't open it, and I wouldn't be surprised by the German Shepherd. She can do about everything and anything, so I may have to cut this short and show off my 40 time, which would make both of us laugh.
Well, I just finished playing with Bob Churchich, great Husker, all Big 8 quarterback from years ago, And,
How was that, man?
Oh, you know what? We play 3 or 4 times a week, and I'll tell you what was really hard for me is I had tough Tony Davis in here the other day, and another friend of Bob's who played earlier. So I had to play with 3 Huskers in one day. So I just told them it was part of my community service assignment that I had to play with 3 guys from Nebraska.
You know, I bump into Tough Tony from time to time. We saw him in Boulder, and what a great ball player, and Bob, of course, at quarterback, and that's pretty good. You bump into it. Let me ask you this: you're in Arizona, and you know there's a lot of Nebraskans that are in Colorado as well. But do you bump into? Are you surprised by the number of Nebraskans you bump into?
Well, absolutely, and and they're so proud to have been a Nebraska football player or associated with Nebraska football. So it's really cool, to really to be able to feel and be around, such a passionate group of followers. And Bob and I talk college football all the time, and actually during my broadcast, he texts me about this or that, so I text him back during the broadcast. But he's become a great friend, and we're both just we love college football, and we just so hope it gets played this year.
You read my mind with that hope, and Coach, we have this is Groundhog Day on the topic of, hey, are they going to play? Are they not going to play? Nobody knows. But since we last talked, how do you feel today? And it's been a while, so what's your takeaway here with what the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have done with going to conference only? I'm a week late on the question, but I'd still like your thoughts on it. And can this get salvaged? Can we still put together a season?
Chris, I don't really think so. I just don't think there's any way that it works. And I don't think anybody's telling us that. Everybody has to hold out hope, and everybody's got to have Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C for this thing. But I really do believe that it's going to be spring football, and it's going to be played in the spring, and it's going to be televised, and we're going to make the most of it. I say that with 97% certainty, but I'm like everybody else. I'm in that 3% I'm holding on to and hoping there's some way it can work. But I just don't see how the numbers can work. I mean, alone in the Pac-12, you've got both Arizona schools, all 4 California schools are probably, there's no way they're going to play. So you've got 2 Washington schools, 2 Oregon schools, Colorado and Utah trying to play, and maybe it's a little different in the Big Ten, but I don't think so. When you look at all the numbers and things that are happening, I just think it's really going to be a tough thing to have happen. That we have football.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, and that's the feel we can put off, and we can be patient, and you can delay the start. Do you get a game in, do you think? Or is this going to be, one league's going to say we're out and the rest of the leagues will follow suit? The way I feel, I think that the SEC is kind of heck bent on playing, and they're also open to spring because it's nice there in
right.
year round in the SEC footprint, and a lot of the Big 10 is not in the spring. The Big 12 is pretty nice in some of the areas in the spring, as is the Pac-12. How would you juggle this on your plate, Coach Barnett, having to shift to spring ball where you're not just prepping and repping, it's let's play ball for real? How would you do it?
Well, I think it depends on where you are. And in the case of Colorado with Carl Durrell coming in, I've never even had a practice with his players at all. Never even seen him in workouts. So for him, playing a spring schedule probably is a benefit for him. But you take a team like Clemson, who's poised to win another national championship. They have all these guys coming back. All the teams that have veteran players, Alabama, veteran coaches, for them, it's a missed opportunity to not play in the fall because they have a decided advantage. But going into the spring, then, it depends on how your recruiting works, how many guys can come on campus, whether they can work into the system, how soon you start. There's a lot of ifs there. But you've got to, these coaches today, they really have to have three plans. They have to, one, if they play in the fall and be ready to have teams forfeit in the middle of a week to only play. You think you're going to play 11 or 12 games and only play in 6. What's that really net you? But I think America needs sports right now. They need to see sports on television, and everybody wants to make it work. But I think to answer your question, you really start planning for a spring season. And if you're in the Big Ten, you play it as late as you can. The SEC, you probably play it any time you want. Pac-12 probably can play most of the time, but everybody's going to may have a little bit different schedule to play here. And of course, it all comes down to TV. What's TV willing to pay for, and what are they willing to put on the air?
Coach, look at Nebraska. From what you've seen of Nebraska and Coach Frost going into year 3, if it is a spring season, is this a positive thing for Nebraska or a negative thing because they aren't getting to play ball? They didn't get a spring football season either, but where the program's at and trying to go, what does a spring season mean for Nebraska in your opinion?
Well, I think it depends on whose eyeglasses you're looking through, but let's assume if we do play this year, then and we're just in Nebraska's case, they're just going to play a Big Ten schedule. They're going to have to pick up Michigan, Michigan State, or Maryland. Now, Maryland is a real good chance to win. The other two are going to be more difficult. Doesn't mean they can't win, but if you don't have to do that this fall, and you can wait till the spring and get that much more time under your belt before you play a full schedule, I think it benefits a team like Nebraska. It takes a little bit of a pressure off. Depends on how they feel they're going to be going into the season. If they are looking at, we're going to fight for a 6-6 season or a 5-5 season, then you know what? It's probably better that they wait till the spring. It just, what it comes down to, Chris? It really comes down to how much money everybody can afford to lose. In Nebraska's case, they probably lose around $96 million is the number I saw if they don't play in the fall. Ohio State's going to lose over $100,000. Colorado would probably lose, 100. I don't mean 100,000, but
right, 100 million.
100 million. Colorado would probably lose 50 million. And so, where do you make that up? How do you make that up? Do you borrow it? And if so, you've got to have some, Title IX is going to be an issue in there somewhere. You're going to get relief from Title IX. That's an issue I haven't heard anybody talk about. But once you don't have fall football, then funding of a lot of sports in most schools becomes a real issue. And then Title IX requires you to fund everybody at the same level. And we all know that the only reason to play a spring football schedule would be to make up for some of that lost revenue. Nobody else is going to make up for that revenue other than football. So you're going to probably need some sort of federal relief from Title IX restrictions. Is that going to happen? So, there's a lot of things going on that each coach has to take into consideration.
That's a large domino that just led into many more dominoes. Do we need a college football czar, or do you like how each conference is kind of looking out for themselves and with a regional approach to it? Because this pandemic is affecting people differently. Nebraska's had a spike in some numbers, but it's still not bad, and I'm sensitive to those that are sick. with this, but from a hospitalization and a loss of life standpoint, Nebraska's in a way better spot than, let's just say, New Jersey and for sure Florida or Texas.
Right.
As you look at Arizona, I mean, I know you spend a lot of the time down there. That's exploded. My folks haven't gone back to Arizona. And then also when you're in Colorado, I mean, it's very difficult because it is not cookie cutter, Coach. That's why I'm going to ask this question and it makes sense from a dollars and cents standpoint. And I don't know if Nebraska would be able to pull this off, but say the Big Ten is going to try and move forward. Let's just walk down that line like, okay, we're going to have football or try and have football, but you have X number of teams on your schedule that can't play. Could you fill in your schedule with some regional teams, the Kansas schools or an Iowa State? Do you think the league will let that happen?
I think so. I think if the league wants football to happen and they realize the economic consequences of not playing, then I think everybody's going to bend a little bit in this deal. Nobody's going to be real. You can't be really strict at this point in time. And, you know, everybody's got to absorb and change and be willing to change and be flexible in these situations. So I would think that there could be some of that flexibility. The question about a czar, I think probably this particular pandemic and what it's done with the NCAA and everything probably means that there should be a czar for Power 5 conferences. I don't know how you get that done, but it seems to me that there ought to be one voice. And the NCAA's voice for the schools at the Power 5 and the financial losses that are out there for them versus those that are not in the Power 5, it's night and day. It's two different animals. And then I think because of that, you need probably some sort of a czar kind of a situation.
Coach, I'll let you get out on this, and I need to know who you think's going to win the Memorial, who you betting on, or you're pulling for, and have you been able to outdrive DeChambeau recently?
I can't even outdrive him with two shots, Chris, right now. So I'm having a power outage. I've called the Colorado Power Company to see if they can help me. But, no, I don't know who's going to win that thing, but I think it's sort of cool. They're playing the same course 2 weeks in a row. I think they're going to probably speed up the greens and make it tougher. But I don't know who to pick in this doggone thing. You got a favorite?
Well, Tiger's not doing so well. Finau is at -6 right now, and I know it's just day one. Tiger just, that was Rory. Rory was, I think, even, and now he's 2 under. I'm going to be weak and go with Bryson. I think he's that hot, and I think he's hitting it that far, and I don't have a number. What do you know what he did today, or am I just all wet already with that?
No,
pick?
I don't know, but I would have to go with Bryson right now. I mean, nobody's hitting it further than he is, and he's just changing the game, which has already been changed to distance, but he's changing it even more. So he's blowing it by everybody by 40 yards.
Tiger's working on a birdie putt right now on the 18th to at least try and get in at 1 under, and bottom of the cup. Barney, man, I tell you what, it looked like one of your putts that I see.
We have foam in the bottom of our cups, so we would never get all the way to the bottom.
He drilled that. Well, Coach, you stay safe and healthy, and thanks for jumping on and talking about this with us again. And we'll talk down the road. You take care, okay? You
got it, Chris. Talk later.
All right, there he is, Coach Gary Barnett with us on Hail Varsity Radio. I'm in a power outage. That's hilarious. We got to call the Colorado Power Company. That's funny, man. Barnett's rolling around the golf courses, and he's surrounded by Huskers. That's good stuff. Tiger drilled a long putt. Vintage Tiger with that putter to go 1 under. Brandon Vogel is going to be with us. We'll talk some Big Ten. Hail Varsity continues, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And And we're back
Fellas, you think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Awesome, awesome stuff from Gary Barnett. He is an optimistic guy, but he is not optimistic about football until springtime. You're going to hear that interview with Coach Barnett. It'll be posted ESPNLincoln.com, the on-demand section. It'll be up on the HailVarsity.com site for the podcast as well. And I got a kick out of the fact that Coach Barnett was, as he put it, surrounded by Huskers on the golf course. So that was interesting. So just to give you an update, we're doing the show, my backyard on the patio, testing the equipment out for our live show Saturday with Tee Off for Treasures. That is coming up 7 to 9 a.m. Searles and his crew going to be out, and chance to raise money and funds and awareness about pediatric brain cancer. Excited to do that. We are testing the equipment out. It's been good. We've had to put the German Shepherd away because I think the last 20 minutes of the show, the back door has been wide open with the air conditioner going. And she just wanted to open the door because she can do that. We welcome in Brandon Vogel from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Excited to talk some more ball with him. Vogues, how you doing? What's shaking on Thursday?
Oh, not a whole lot. Doing pretty well. Now, another day closer to something. I'm not sure what, but such are the times.
Another day closer to disappointment. Can we utter that with a straight face?
Oh, yeah, we can utter it with a straight face. Yeah, it's, man, you just kind of look week to week, like, oh, here's how I felt a week ago. Here's how I feel now. And it's never the same.
So if we're going to look at Mark Emmert's statement, how much of the pin is still left in the grenade here?
Maybe about a third, I would say. I mean, it was another. It was another way for kind of the powers that be to drive home that look, things are not trending the right way for this. So it is what it is. I think those guidelines that the NCAA put out, or recommendations, I guess, to use the official term, made sense. Like when you thought about it, it's probably pretty close to what you came up with for what a team might try and do. So it's good that they're still putting those things in place, but the key part of that release was the little hint there that, hey, if the trends don't change, like there's no way this is starting on time, which, you talk about how quickly things change. A week ago, the Big Ten announced it was moving to conference only. I was of the mind that, you're going to move like everything up and try and get as much in before the expected fall kind of second wave hits. But now I think you're looking at moving things back so you can maybe hopefully get in after the first wave kind of comes down a little bit.
Brandon Vogel's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Vogues, I understand that things are going the wrong way with infections, and we need to pay attention to those. Infections can honestly turn into hospital stays or worse. I understand that. But I also kind of like the take that's out there by some football coaches. Look, if we push it off till spring, we still may not get it. It could get worse. That's kind of a Harbaugh thought. And I'm of the mindset, let's try and at least get a couple 3 games in. September 5th, let's start it. Let's keep it to maybe no fans or limited fans, depending on what your governor and mayor of the region you're in say. And if the other team is willing to travel and feels okay with playing, let's do it. Because it's really awful in about 4 states where everybody recruits. That's horrible. Doesn't mean you should shut down what can happen in Lincoln or can happen in Columbus. I know Michigan's its own animal, but I would like to see some patience on that. I guess that's my thought versus going from bad to worse, Vogues, with last week's statement that you can take different ways because people can get creative. Joel Klatt, did you see that little Twitter blurb from him? He's like, let's make this thing go through December, but you got every other week. That way you have testing. That way you have a 72-hour bubble to test and make sure folks are okay. It can get done, but again, the liability part of it's a big scare, especially from the NCAA.
Yeah, that's a key piece. The problem, I think, with if you start relatively on time with pushing things too late, the NCAA has always been pretty hesitant to do that. Who knows with whether schools will be in session. Like, I know a lot of schools initially plan to basically be done with in-person classes after Thanksgiving, but the other tricky part of this is, the NCAA's had like 50 years of kind of a court decision that helped define the term student athlete. And it's really key to the whole amateurism debate. And you start looking at getting players on campus where maybe the majority of students are not, asking them to go like full on through December. I mean, I know teams still go through December, but there's a little bit of a break there. It just becomes really easy to say, hey, are we football players or are we essential employees? And I mean, I think we know, most of us know what we're talking about here. It's been pretty clear that they're close to essential employees for a long time. And now we're just kind of underscoring and seeing how much that's the case with the revenue at stake. But that's like the third rail for the NCAA. They can't go there. So that's the other thing that kind of complicates this and it probably makes it difficult to just go full on, like December is a full month of the season, even though we're like super close to that already when you look at a team that might be done the last Saturday in November and then play one of those early bowl games on December 26th.
Vogues, a thought with Nebraska and I asked Coach Barnett this question, and he said, well, it depends what lens you're looking through. From a chance to hit pause, and if you've got the green light to develop and practice. I know Nebraska didn't get their spring practice, but what type of workouts and practicing can be held and can you have, if anything, if there isn't a season? Can you still, within your own football team, do something versus sitting idle? Could this be the timeout, for lack of a better term, that Nebraska gets and needs to reload and regenerate and catch up? Nebraska's never, whoever's been the head coach, they've never been able to have a 4-8 season. I mean, there's been them, but it's created a lot of stress. There's no reset moment for a football program that's got 50 years of double-digit wins, it feels like. Could this be a good thing, and would it benefit Nebraska from a development standpoint if they just have time with themselves, if that's allowed?
I think so. And I think that's because Nebraska's in kind of exactly the right spot for that to be the case. They could certainly use that time. I think most teams could use that time, but also just kind of with the makeup of the team. So you've got kind of a youth wave coming on defense anyway, which is what you have to replace. The offense returns everybody, but still isn't very senior laden. And you don't have, guys right now that you would say, oh, that's 100% a surefire NFL draft pick. If they don't play football until the spring, like Hunter Lawrence is never playing football for Clemson again. That's what you're looking at. Nebraska doesn't really have that. It needs to get back to that point eventually. I'm sorry, Trevor Lawrence needs to get back to that point eventually, but they're not there yet. So I think it's kind of a good spot for Nebraska. If we have to go that way, they could use that extra time. And I don't think it costs them too much, at least with how we look at it now.
That's absolutely right. Do you trudge forward and play, and how many games do you win, right? In an already brutal schedule. And where's your team going to be at for future showdowns, be it Oklahoma or matches against the Michigans and Ohio States before you before you get that showcase game like we all wanted, and then was on last night and cringed at. I don't know if you were watching ESPNU, but for some reason someone let one past the goalie, and the old 2019 Nebraska-Ohio State game was on TV for 2 hours last evening.
I'm surprised with, editing a rebroadcast of the game, they could get 2 hours out of it. That one was over pretty quick, and wasn't a whole lot to see there in the second half. But yeah, it's I think we'll see at some point, I guess. Like, I have a sense, and who knows, because we don't get to see it. We just kind of get little bits and pieces here and there. Like, I feel like Nebraska seems to have done a pretty good job of maximizing this strange time that it's already had. So basically the spring without football. And I think they could do that again. And then you add in it's just a roster that's still really young, kind of at the right point where it's like, if we don't play now, then player A, B, and C are gone. They don't have a ton of that. So I think they'd be okay.
Vogues, a quick thought on Jaquiz Yant, the walk-on from Tallahassee. Kind of a surprise that Nebraska's adding a kid of his caliber, but probably not a surprise knowing the connections Coach Fisher has. Do you think he stays in the running back room, or do they look at him at linebacker / that in-the-box safety? I mean, he's a big kid that can move. What's your reaction? I got about a minute here to Yant's move to Lincoln.
Yeah, a little bit of free money. When you look at a guy who kind of had the interest level he had, a 3-star recruit, a guy who could easily be a scholarship recruit at Nebraska or similar Power 5 schools, be able to get that guy to walk on. And to have a connection with some of his teammates who are in the class as well, you probably got a pretty good sense of them. You go to Florida to recruit these guys, you talk to the coach, be like, hey, tell me about your team. He's probably a name that came up. Took a quick glance at his film and pretty impressive. I think it makes sense to start him in the running back room, though he's an intriguing option defensively, and I think a little bit of that will depend maybe mostly on linebacker depth. Nebraska's got a little more depth in the secondary, got some good kind of on-campus already options, I think, for that in-the-box safety, but if things don't work out there, or he development doesn't work out there, certainly be an option on that side of the ball too.
Vogues, thanks for jumping on. We'll talk Saturday morning. Thanks for the time, buddy.
Thank you. Bye.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Damon Barr. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Damon Barr. That's 2 R's for Damon. It is Elijah Herbal and Damon Barr tomorrow. It is state baseball for Junior. He is off to Omaha, and the Lincoln A's are trying to stay hot till we head to Las Vegas and find the pride of Chicago, Danny Burke, and we can get some prop bets on 13 and under youth baseball in Omaha. Danny, can't we? How are you?
I am doing good, Schmitty. Congrats to what is it? The Lincoln A's, right? Champions. I saw you post. So that must.
Yeah. They not only found a way to win 4 games in 2.5 days, but they got to do so in lovely Council Bluffs.
So did you make after you won? Did you celebrate at the Horseshoe Casino? Is that what happened after?
I always celebrate when I go to the shoe because we were fortunate enough to do some shows out there last year. But no, I mean, all honest to God truth, I mean, Coach Brett's wife and Mama Bunny, they wanted to go to the club, so you may or may not have seen that picture of them out in front of the juice bar that was 18 feet from the ballpark.
I did see that picture, and when you walked in, they're like, "Hey, Schmitty, how you doing?" Right? They know you by name there.
Well, it's not me they know by name; it's Mama. So it's Cinnamon. It's Cinnamon. That's her name when she's working. I'm kidding. Her father's going to stab me. Let's get into some gambling. How's that sound? We can get into another pastime, right? We can get into the old gambling take. And Danny Burke does an amazing job. He's the pride of Chicago. You hopefully hear him on VSiN, Sirius XM channel 204. Danny's got a couple of different shows going there, and you follow Danny on Twitter at DannyBurke5. Danny, what have you been kind of focused in on this week? I'm watching the Memorial now, and Tiger finishes at -1 in the first round. I know that Finau is leading the way at -6. Who did you get on, or did you stay away from folks with some options? I know that Tiger was a really big-time long shot, but folks around the betting industry loved that, and some jumped on him. What did you do?
Yeah, so I've only bet a little bit of golf up until this point, and I actually did bet some last night because the main thing I've been going with is UFC, and we have a guy who comes on, Lou Finicaro, who's just been killing it, and I followed one of his picks after we had him on the show with Lerone Murphy last night as a slight underdog. So I had those winnings going, and I was like, you know what the hell, I'll play some golf this weekend because, of course, we have a show called Long Shots on our network, too, where the guys do a great job handicapping all the golf tournaments. And, yeah, so they do a really good job, and I was following some of those plays, and so I kind of just dabbled all over the place. I don't consider myself an expert when it comes to handicapping golf by any means, but some of the bets that I made was Chev Reavie at about plus 200 to win the whole thing, or not plus 200, excuse me. I bet him at 20,000 or 200 to 1. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go over my list right now. I had the
No, you're fine.
Now I got the right one. Okay, so 200 to 1 I had Ches Reavie. Threw a little bit on there, took a flyer on him. Now I got the list. Okay. And then I had Brooks Koepka, who is struggling a little bit today in some parts. I had him as a top 20 finish at plus 120. Hideki Matsuyama, I have him at a top 20 finish at plus 110. Ches Reavie once again at 5 to 1 for a top 20 finish. And then Shane Lowry threw a little bit on him, 125 to 1 to win the whole thing, too. So this was kind of just going off some of the advice they gave and what guys could play better in this course. And some of the guys who had a pretty strong finish last weekend, too, because it was a really unique situation considering they were still at Muirfield Village. So it'll be fun to see how this one plays out, Schmidt.
Are you focusing in? I mean, we're not far off from baseball starting up. NBA is getting closer and closer. Have you found some value, Danny, in win totals in a crazy year? I mean, have you circled in on some teams you like, either on the hardwood or on the diamond?
Yeah, you know what, Schmitty? I actually have, and I can start in the NBA. I like the Miami Heat. They have win totals posted at DraftKings at least, and they're at 4.5. The over is plus 165. The under was minus $2 the last I saw. And I really like the Heat and the way their schedule sets up. They're still fighting for seeding position here. And I believe, I had the schedule in front of me before, but they play the Pacers twice, and that's going to be the team that it really comes down to with seeding. We maybe will see Oladipo, maybe not. Even if we do, how much of an impact is he going to be? And they get to see him twice, and I think that's a good opportunity for this Heat team. They have the last 5 games is a good stretch where I think they could go 5-0 and get over that 4.5 mark, and it's really good plus value. And they also get to go against the Bucks. And you might think, well, the Bucks are the best team in the East, and certainly they are. They fit the bill. But how competitive and motivated is this Bucks team going to be? They're pretty much solidified in that 1 seed. And if you're catching the Bucks later on, more than likely they're not going to need to try that hard. So I think a lot of people need to realize that some of these teams don't need to go that crazy. A lot do for seeding, but some don't. And the Bucks are a team that really doesn't. So the Heat were the one in basketball that I really liked, plus 165 over 4.5. I think that was at BetMGM, excuse me, but DraftKings has them too. Baseball-wise, season win total, I'm fading the Red Sox this season. Their win total's at 31.5. The under minus 118 is what I saw at a location. No Alex Cora has a suspension, no Mookie, no Price, Chris Sale out with Tommy John. It's going to be a tough division. I think the Rays have a good chance to make the playoffs, too, and they'll be competitive, which leads me to my next bet. I like the Rays at yes to make the playoffs, minus 110. These next ones are at DraftKings, too. They have the props to make the playoffs. So I'm fading the Red Sox. I think the Rays will make the playoffs. They have a great starting rotation. They've been improving every year. Of course, the Yankees are going to be the Yankees, but I still think the Rays are going to have a great opportunity. You play the Orioles. The Red Sox, like I said, should decline. The Blue Jays are going to be a fun team to watch, but still might be a little too young and a year away, even in the weird season. So I like the Rays to make the playoffs. A long shot I kind of like, just if you're taking a flyer, I like the Rangers, yes, plus 650 to make the playoffs. They bring in Corey Kluber, Lance Lynn, Mike Minor, still a solid rotation. Jordan Lyles, Kyle Gibson coming in. They add in Todd Frazier, Robinson Chirinos. If Gallo can get back to being healthy, if Hunter Pence, can stay healthy, they can do enough in a short span that I think it's worth the value that they can make the playoffs. And I know we're running out of time really quick, Schmitty, but I also like the Nationals to miss the playoffs. They started last season 19-31. Add that on to a World Series hangover. You lose a big hitter in Rendon. They have a great starting rotation, but their bullpen struggles. So I think the Nationals are going to struggle in their division. The Phillies, same division. I think yes, plus 215. There's some good value on the Phillies. They have enough good hitting where they can do well in a short period of time. Don't trust their pitching as much, but I think because of the value, their hitting can do enough to suffice.
That is the Pride of Chicago. It is Danny Burke, and some thoughts on MLB and, of course, the NBA. Some totals to look at there and some thoughts on golf. You listen to him on VSiN and do so on Sirius XM 204. You follow Danny on, of course, Twitter at Danny Burke5. Pride of Chicago, we'll do this again next week, brother. Thanks for a few minutes. And real quick, about 20 seconds here, when can folks hear you?
All right, thank you, Schmitty, you as well. And you can catch me, like you said, 7 to 9 Pacific time, a numbers game I'll be hosting tomorrow and throughout the rest of next week. VSiN.com/subscribe, free content, like you said, Sirius XM 204.
Danny Burke, at Danny Burke5. Be good, Danny. Thanks for the time, brother.
You bet, Schmitty. Have a good one.
There he is. We'll wind down a Thursday next.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Hail Varsity Radio on the road today. The Patio is where we're at. And tee off for Treasures on site Saturday at Woodland Hills, the pediatric brain cancer fundraiser and awareness. Excited to play some golf with Searles and Company on Saturday morning. The weekend edition will be on 7 to 9 from just south of Lincoln, where you had to get back on the road feel, and Patio's been very comfortable today. You know what I'm missing on my patio is a hot tub. And I'm missing Deb the Spa Lady. We say hi to Deb the Spa Lady, Home Innovation Spas, 20th and Highway 2 at Off Industrial Road in Omaha. Deb, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And yes, I heard that word patio, and it just perked my ears up because the patio, that's where you need a hot tub. And yes, we're making that happen. We're getting spas in, and we're probably one of the very few companies that actually have inventory. So come in and see us, and we can get a spa delivered to you within just a matter of just a short time. We've got everything lined up. We have our own electrician. We have financing lined up. We have the inventory. We have our delivery guys. We always have the best service after the sale. So come see us, and we'll make it happen.
Deb, you know what? And my patio is pretty decent. I have friends that have really awesome patios, which means they've got room for that swim spa. But you've got a spa to fit any patio, don't you?
We really do. We have a little two-person spa. We have them all the way up to the big swim spas that you can get, and they're 19 feet long. So the majority of the spas we sell are 7 foot by 7 foot, 8 foot by 8 foot. And they seat roughly 5 to 6 people. So that's the most common one, but we really do have specialty ones, too.
Deb, if folks want to come see you and check out the selection, how do they do that? I know you're open, which is outstanding. And I'm interested to know, weekend, if someone's getting off work and they come by, or, even midweek. What's the timeline for them?
Well, our regular hours are 10 to 6 Monday through Friday and 10 to 4 on Saturday. But we're always more than willing to meet you at a different time. If those hours don't work for you, give us a call and we'll work something out so we can be there when you can.
Deb, that is outstanding. SpasOnline.com is where you log on. You go visit Deb at Home Innovation Spas, 20th and Highway 2 in Lincoln, off Industrial Road in Omaha. Deb, I want you to have a great weekend. Stay healthy, and thanks for your time, and thanks for all you do.
Okay, Chris. Sounds great. Bye-bye.
Take care. That's Deb the Spa Lady, Home Innovation Spas, 20th and Highway 2 in Lincoln. Go see Deb and, get a spa picked up. Let Deb show you. Get a swim spa. You can get a swim spa, and you can have the old Johnny Football swan. You have about 50 of those swans in the swim spa, I promise you. Damon, what are you doing tonight?
I'm taking it easy. I'm probably going to sit on the couch and surf for some spas and then cry at the number in my bank account. Sounds like a nightly occurrence.
You just keep on crying and take some of Danny's advice and triple your money. How's that?
I'll take a best bet today. There we go.
All right. You and Elijah have a good old time tomorrow, all right?
We will. We always do.
All right. Take care. We'll be back at you Saturday from the Tee Up for Treasures. Thanks.